Hello everyone! Welcome back to the channel, the bold and beautiful always, and today we've got something really exciting for you. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Let's jump right in. At University Hospital, where fluorescent lights buzzed over sterile hallways and whispered secrets hung in the air like antiseptic mist, Dr. John Finnegan stood frozen in place outside the radiology department, his hand clenched tightly around a manila folder that contained the results of a routine review that had turned into a nightmare of ethics, betrayal, and twisted medical fraud. And as he exchanged a grim glance with Dr. Bridget Forrester, famed surgeon, brilliant diagnostician, and longtime ally in the trenches of chaos, they both realized that the name printed at the top of those MRI scans wasn't just another patient, but Grace Buckingham, the seemingly sweet and noble mother of Paris and Zoe, a woman who had earned trust at Forrester gatherings with kind smiles, elegant dresses, and tales of heartbreak and resilience, but who, as the results began to unfold under their scrutinizing eyes, had engineered a medical lie so grand, so vile, that it threatened to bring down more than just her reputation. It risked lives, reputations, and the very integrity of the hospital that Finn and Bridget had sworn to protect, because the scans had been manipulated, not just slightly, not with accidental misreads or software glitches, but deliberately altered using an off-site imaging software linked to a clinic in Nevada that had been flagged 3 months earlier for suspicious billing practices. And now, as the dots connected, the story unraveled, one horrifying thread at a time, beginning weeks earlier when Grace, after being denied reinstatement as a full-time practicing physician due to unresolved licensing issues and psychological evaluations that had raised red flags, began frequenting the hospital as a visiting consultant under false credentials, whispering to sympathetic interns that she was being unfairly targeted and needed just one break to get back on her feet, and someone, perhaps naive, perhaps bribed, gave her access to internal systems for a research project, during which she accessed patient records, old scan templates, and drug logs, and that's when it all started, a cascade of fake diagnostics, starting with a patient named Clarissa Vance, who was wrongly told she had early-stage MS based on altered scans, then an elderly man misdiagnosed with vascular dementia when his only real issue was a vitamin deficiency, and though these incidents raised quiet alarms, it wasn't until Grace herself claimed to be undergoing treatment for an undisclosed neurological condition, desperate sobs, dramatic fainting spells, and carefully timed episodes during which she forgot names or stared into space mid-conversation, that anyone took serious notice, and she used it expertly, gaining sympathy from Ridge, who told her to take all the time she needs, and even from Brooke, who encouraged her to explore holistic healing, but it was Finn, ever observant, who first noticed discrepancies in the pharmacy log, a new prescription for rivastigmine, typically used for Alzheimer's, had been filled under Grace's name but not recorded in her official chart, and when Bridget joined him to audit controlled medication flows for a hospital compliance report, they found something even darker. Several neurotoxic compounds had gone missing over the past month, and one, physostigmine, had been dispensed under emergency override, only to be returned half-used and with no matching patient record, and as they dug deeper, they realized Grace had been using these agents on herself to mimic symptoms, low doses at controlled times to induce tremors, confusion, and nausea, just enough to trigger concern, not enough to require ICU care, and then she would request MRIs, subtly pressure techs to send the scans to her preferred analyst offsite, and voila, another falsified scan would confirm her lie, and her story would continue, until one day she asked Bridget for a second opinion, claiming her latest doctor wasn't listening to her anymore. And Bridget, confused but kind, agreed, and that's when she spotted the first glitch in the scan metadata, a frame rate inconsistency and a DICOM header timestamp that didn't match the scheduled scan time, which immediately raised her suspicion, and she brought it to Finn, who verified her concern and began checking hospital cameras, discovering that on the day of Grace's scan, she hadn't even entered the MRI suite at all. And with growing dread, they compared this fake scan to one pulled from a radiology case study journal, and it matched exactly, down to the noise artifacts and lesion patterns, proving she had used a generic scan and passed it off as her own. But even that wasn't the worst of it, because the pills, told the rest of the story. Grace had been slipping memory enhancement supplements to select staff members, claiming she was testing holistic remedies, but in truth, she was microdosing some with scopolamine and others with low-dose benzodiazepines too. confused their memories and reactions, making herself appear more credible as they began second-guessing whether they had actually seen her faint or misplace files, and one poor intern was even briefly hospitalized with an unexplained seizure after taking one of Grace's supplements, and when the toxicology came back, the presence of unregistered alkaloids prompted Finn to order a full sweep of the break room supplements and personal locker inspections, something that was usually off-limits but granted under emergency protocol, and there, in Grace's locker, behind a row of pressed white coats and lavender sachets, was a pouch labeled TheraClarity Brain Power Drops, which upon analysis, contained trace amounts of atropine and muscarinic inhibitors, agents that could cause hallucinations, memory loss, and acute cognitive dysfunction, especially if administered over time, and now, holding all the proof, Finn and Bridget didn't know whether to call security first or contact legal. Because this wasn't just unethical, it was criminal, and as they moved quickly, Grace, already sensing something was wrong after noticing Bridget's sudden coldness and Finn's pointed questions, tried to flee, but was intercepted in the hospital parking garage by security after Finn triggered a silent alert, and when she was brought into the administrative boardroom, escorted by 2 officers, she remained eerily calm, even as Bridget laid out the evidence, tampered scans, falsified access logs, stolen compounds, and altered pill contents. Grace simply folded her hands and said, "I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just needed people to listen, to care," and when asked why she did it, she looked up with empty eyes and murmured, "Because being forgotten is worse than death," and at that, Bridget turned away in horror, tears stinging her eyes, while Finn clenched his jaw and informed her she would be reported to the medical board, to law enforcement, and to every licensing body from here to Europe, because what she had done could have killed someone, and worse, it had stolen trust from people who truly believed in healing, and as Grace was escorted out in handcuffs, the news spread like wildfire across the Forrester network, with Paris collapsing in tears upon hearing what her mother had done, and Zoe, calling from London, stunned into silence, wondering if anything about their childhood memories, doctor visits, illnesses, even Grace's grief after their father's disappearance, had been real at all, and Ridge, who had once defended Grace, now lashed out in frustration, calling her betrayals sick and sociopathic, while Brooke, with a heavy heart, wondered aloud if this was a symptom of untreated trauma or a descent into something far more malignant, and Hope, ever compassionate, offered support to Paris, who now felt like her mother was a stranger, and in the aftermath, as Finn and Bridget stood in the darkened hospital conference room, exhausted and emotionally spent, Bridget whispered, "How many more are out there like her?" and Finn, placing the last of Grace's forged reports into a sealed evidence bag, said quietly, "Enough to remind us why the truth must always come first," and together, they vowed to rebuild the broken trust Grace had shattered, knowing that medicine, like family, only thrives when it's grounded in honesty, not deception. Liam Spencer appears in Bold and the Beautiful alive. And given that he appears to have a long life ahead of him, it is time to discuss with whom he will fall in love again now that he is not dying. Bold and Beautiful, Liam is saved by Bill. Alright, so Bill Spencer, aka Daddy Warbucks, just paid a cool $1 million for a miracle cure for Liam. Now, we don't know if Grace Buckingham was just lying for a big payday or if he ever had a brain tumor. But even if she was lying to everybody, Liam still legit thought he was dying. Therefore, it will continue to feel like a miracle to him, Steffi Forrester, Hope Logan, Bill, and all of his loved ones. Therefore, at the present time, Liam believes that he underwent this experimental surgery, that his brain tumor is completely gone, and that he is ready to go. Even if Grace lied, clearly Liam did have an actual health crisis. Because Luna Nozawa shot him in the chest after he cracked his head open and pointed it at Bill, causing a serious brain bleed. So, he's not been without trauma. Bold and the Beautiful, Liam isn't going anywhere. In any case, Liam is going to live, which indicates that he will soon require love in his life. After a near-death experience, what is more life-affirming than falling in love? Let's just hope Liam's not near Bill's coffee table when he does fall head over heels. We don't want him to crack his head again. But what we really want to talk about is who will be Liam's lucky lady. Obviously, first person we got to talk about based on recent episodes is Ivy Forrester, who just came back on the Bold and the Beautiful character canvas. She and Liam had a romance years ago. They had a marriage in the past, and Ivy was just telling her niece Electra Forrester that Liam was the best boyfriend she ever had. Ivy even said that Liam was the main reason she came back to LA. Bold and the beautiful, Ivy wants Liam back. But right now, Ivy still thinks Liam is dying. Because not everyone at Forrester Creations has heard about the miraculous cure yet. Liam, Steffi, Hope, and Bill are still processing the amazing news. As a result, Ivy was explaining to Electra how the loss of Liam puts everything into perspective and how she wished they had a second chance. As a result, once Ivy learns that Liam will survive, she might rush over to Casa Spencer, shove Bill out of the way, and then she might tell Liam that she still loves him and wants to be with him. Bold and the beautiful, Steffi will flip if Ivy goes after Liam. It's possible that the show was saving Ivy as a more regular character for when Liam was cured, or fake cured, whatever it was. However, Steffi and Ivy have been rivals for a long time. Steffi also became extremely resentful and spiteful when she saw Ivy having lunch with Liam for the first time, possibly in October of last year. A married woman would not have liked it. So, I'm interested to see if Ivy pursues Liam, whether Steffi will start acting that way again, or maybe Hope gets in the mix and gets jealous. You never know. I mean, Steffi may interfere. Despite the fact that Ivy's jewelry line is back at Forrester, she is not a fan. I could see Steffi pushing Hope towards Liam just so Ivy can't have him. Steffi and Hope are also good friends. And Steffi is actually not big on the Carter-Walton-Hope pairing since together they stole the family business. So, yeah, I could see Steffi shoving Liam towards Hope just to stop Ivy and for other reasons. The Bold and the Beautiful, Hope and Liam's upcoming reunion? And that leads us to lady number 2, which is Hope herself. If, in fact, Liam was merely pushing Hope toward Carter. Because he was dying, now that he's not, Liam may want to reunite with Hope. Therefore, if Hope is the one in his heart, even if Ivy showed up and told Liam that she wanted him, he might gently disappoint her. If you remember, the last person Liam spoke to before he was shot was Hope, and he was talking about how much she meant to him. And now that he is fully recovered, Liam might inquire whether Hope would choose him over Carter or whether she is in love with him and this engagement is genuine. He wouldn't, in my opinion, be overly harsh about it. However, he might pitch. Bold and the Beautiful, will Liam fight for Hope? You know, Liam might explain to Hope that he was only pushing her towards Carter. Because he didn't want her to be alone after he died, and he could tell her, you know, he's still in love with her, never fell out of love with her, wants a future with her. I do think Hope is still in love with Liam and wants to try again. So, Hope may tell Liam, yeah, I want a future with you. And then Hope's got to sit down with Carter, call off the engagement so that she can be with Liam. And to be honest, if Carter got married, it would be a miracle. He's always an efficient, rarely a groom. You know, the guy version of always a bridesmaid. Plus, you know, he walked out on his last wedding. So, Carter getting walked out on would be karmic. Bold and the Beautiful, Daphne back for Carter? I don't think Hope wants to hurt Carter. But I do think her heart belongs to Liam. And this would be perfect timing. Because Daphne Rose is returning to Los Angeles. She is back to Forrester Creations this week, which takes Carter by surprise. And Daphne would love to have another shot with Carter. So, if Hope bounces back over to Liam, that could be kind of a win-win since Daphne, you know, is going to be letting Carter know she still wants him. And we can't talk about his next big love without mentioning his other ex-wife, Steffi. I'm adding her in for discussion purposes. I think most fans would prefer to see Steffi staying happy with Finn. And you know, they're now good friends, he and Liam. And given all that Finn's done for Liam, it'd be terrible if he tried to steal Finn's wife now that he got his miracle cure or imaginary cure, whatever it's going to be. Bold and the Beautiful, Sally Spectra back to LA? I don't think fans want more of Liam, Steffi, and Finn triangle. I know I don't. Another possibility from a whole other angle is that they bring back Sally's Spectra. I think it'd be cool if Bold and the Beautiful had her back. Because Billy Abbott, whom I don't like in Young and the Restless, keeps her in a relationship that never ends. When Sally was on B&B, if you remember, she fell for Liam when he was married to Steffi. And then Liam and Sally almost died together when Bill blew up the Spectra building. When they thought they were going to die, Sally kissed Liam. Naturally, that actually blew up more than just the building. But Liam's marriage to Steffi. So, if Sally came back to LA, she might be thrilled to find Liam single as a Pringle and Steffi and Liam divorced and Steffi happily remarried to a hot doctor. Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing that. Does Bold and the Beautiful introduce Liam to a new person? The last thing to mention in terms of a new love for Liam, though, is that Bold could always cast a brand new love interest, someone different that Liam's never been with before. You know, I do like a fresh and interesting change of pace. But Bold and the Beautiful is not known for doing that. I think Finn is the last major new love interest that's been brought in for a main character. They brought in Daphne and she's more of an ancillary character. Additionally, I believe she was ultimately intended for Carter, who is receiving more screen time. However, due to the fact that he is one of the show's writers, he is more of an ancillary character than anything else. So, we'll wait and see how it goes. You know, I have to say there's a possibility of a new character. But again, I strongly doubt it. My preference in order would be Ivy first, then Sally, then Hope, Logan, anybody but Steffi, really. Because I don't want Finn's marriage to go wrong. Liam Spencer's world had always revolved around the impossible tug-of-war between hope and heartbreak, but now, with his so-called terminal diagnosis behind him, thanks to Bill Spencer's wild million-dollar Hail Mary and the miracle cure that may or may not have ever truly been necessary, he emerged from the cocoon of death with clarity in his soul and a passionate, desperate longing in his heart to live, love, and reclaim what he thought he'd lost. And that meant one thing: love was back on the table, and the question now wasn't if he would fall again, but with whom he would tumble headfirst into the turbulent ocean of romance, and the contenders were already circling like butterflies drawn to the golden flame of his rebirth. First, there was Ivy Forrester, the stunning Australian designer who had returned to LA just as Liam's life was hanging in the balance, and who had whispered to her niece Electra Forrester that Liam was the best man she'd ever known, the one who got away. The one whose memory kept her from ever truly giving her heart to another. Her confession was raw, honest, and heartbreaking, because she believed Liam was about to die, and she'd never get a second chance to right what once went wrong, but fate had different plans, and now that Liam was very much alive, Ivy's heart surged with purpose, and the moment the news hit her ears, she raced toward Casa Spencer like a woman on a mission, swearing silently that she would never lose him again, and as Bill opened the door and ushered her in, she saw Liam seated by the window, looking out at the skyline with an expression that mixed gratitude and exhaustion, but when he turned and saw Ivy standing there, her eyes shimmering with tears, time seemed to fold in on itself, and for a moment, they were back on that beach, back when kisses meant promises and smiles weren't stained with sorrow, and Ivy stepped forward, trembling, as she confessed she still loved him, had never stopped, and wanted to explore a future with him. But just as the emotional walls between them began to crack, another shadow loomed in the room, not from Bill or Wyatt or anyone else, but from the specter of Hope Logan, who still lingered in Liam's heart like a melody he couldn't quite forget, because before he was shot, before Luna's bullet tore through the fragile web of his destiny, he had told Hope she was everything, the one he would love with his dying breath, and now that breath was not his last, it became a promise he couldn't abandon. So even as Ivy poured her soul into his hands, Liam's thoughts drifted to Hope, to her golden hair and trembling voice when she had leaned over his hospital bed and whispered that she never stopped loving him either, that if he had more time, maybe they could find their way back to each other. And though Hope had since become engaged to Carter Walton in the storm of grief and confusion, Liam knew, deep in his newly healed heart, that her feelings hadn't vanished, and So the idea of rekindling their once sacred flame burned in him like wildfire, leading to a quiet, tension-fraught reunion at Forrester Creations where he asked her outright if she still loved him and whether she would consider calling off the engagement to Carter, who, despite his impressive abs and rock-solid dependability, always seemed to be on the receiving end of heartbreak. And while Hope hesitated, torn between duty and desire, Daphne Rose, Carter's former flame and surprise returnee to LA, entered stage left, making eyes at Carter and dropping hints that maybe she still had a place in his life, and just like that, the web of romantic confusion thickened. Yet for all the chemistry Liam shared with Ivy,